Hello, South Korea. How I wish I were there with you. But we're talking about revival in the church. I've learned one thing about revival. Revival goes along with the revival of relationships of the people who make up the church. If their personalized relationships are not changed, then the church will never have revival. And in the building of an individual, a believer, and seeing their growth and all, you have a pyramid. And part of the pyramid is four sections. And here's what these four sections are. The top is one's behavior. That's the little pyramid on the top of the pyramid. That's what you see when you look at a person. It's like an iceberg. You know, you're out in the ocean, you see this iceberg, there's that piece of ice there. But underneath your sight line, underneath the water, is a huge, massive piece of ice you don't see. It's the same thing with the individual. We see a person's behavior. But the question is, what drives our behavior? It's our values. It's what we attach meaning to things in our lives and principles that we hold as very important. Our values drive our behavior. But the next question is, what forms our values? It's our beliefs. Our beliefs form our values that drive our behavior. But what creates our beliefs? I really believe it's relationships. Relationships forms our beliefs that creates our values that drives our behavior. A 2015 research study showed several things. One, for people in their 20s, the most important thing to them is the number of relationships they have. But you know that changes in the 30s? In the 30s, the most important thing is the quality of the relationships that you have is what influences your life. Harvard did an 80-year study. Can you imagine an 80-year study on relationships and all? And this is what they found out. People who fared best, who had the greatest joy and purpose in their life and everything, were people who leaned into relationships. Relationships were important to them with family, friends, and their community. But here's what they also found out, that relationships with friends have very little impact on your life. The impact is the relationships that you have with your family. Those are the ones that has the greatest impact. And those who were not close to their families in relationships died a lot younger. Whoa, that's a powerful impact to relationships on giving you life. Close relationships to your family leads to longevity of life. And then people who are strained in family ties, who struggle with family relationships, seem to always have greater chronic health problems than those who had very good relationships with their family. So if one wants to be healthy and live for a long time, guard your relationships with your family. In Psalm 26:3, the Word of God says this, "For I am always aware of your unfailing love." It didn't say once in a while, a couple times a week. No, it said, I'm always aware of your unfailing love for me, relationship. And what did that do? And I have lived according to your truth. I really believe if they had not seen that loving relationship with the Father, they would not have lived according to truth. And it says, teach me your ways, O Lord, that I may live according to your truth. Now, what would cause a person to pray that? God, I want to live according to your truth. I want to live the way you created me to live. This is what it says, because the next part of the verse says this, for your love for me is very great. It's relationships that affect our life, our relationship with God and with others. The quality of it always comes back to relationships. And here are three phrases that I found very meaningful over the years. One is this, rules without relationships lead to rebellion. Kids don't respond to rules. Kids don't respond to boundaries. They respond to rules and boundaries in the context of a loving, close relationship, especially with their father. So the first principle is rules without relationships lead to rebellion. The second is this: truth without relationships leads to rejection. Truth about pornography. Truth about how much time you spend on the cell phone. Truth about your behavior. If that is not dealt with in the context of a loving, close relationship, especially with a father, then you'll have rebellion and not response. And then another phrase is this: discipline without relationships leads to anger, resentment, and bitterness. I would never ever think of disciplining a child who I did not have a loving, close relationship. Why? Because I'd probably get the opposite reaction or response that I want to give. And so I want to sum it up with this: rules without relationships lead to rebellion. Truth without relationships leads to rejection. Discipline without relationships leads to anger, resentment, and bitterness. But here's the key. In one study, they wanted to find out, is there anything that can override these negative factors in a person's life as parents when we care about our children? One is peer pressure. Every parent is concerned about the pressure of their friends upon their behavior and all. Second, society pressure. With all that's going on in Hollywood and coming out in the newspapers and television, the internet and everything, is there anything that will override that in a positive way in a child's life? Second, advertising, all the promotion with negative aspects of the human body, everything. The pressure of college, when a child goes away to college and all the pressures, is there anything that can override that pressure and affect a child's life? And the other are movies. Whether we like it or not, movies have a profound effect upon our children, for good, bad, and ugly. Is there anything that will override all of that? What about internet and gaming? What about pornography? I mean, one of the greatest pressures on any young person today is pornography. And every parent should have knowledge about the size of pornography, its influence, and know how to talk to their children about it. So the question is there anything that can override all these negative pressures? And after a major study, they found one thing that would override all of that. And you know what it was? A close, loving relationship with their father. Not so much the mother, but the father. It's that relationship with the father can override peer pressure, social pressure, movies, internet, gaming, everything. That shows how powerful relationships are, especially with the daddy. And then they did a study at Johns Hopkins University. Two professors, they evaluated over 1,377 students to find a common cause for mental illness, hypertension, malignant tumor, coronary heart disease, suicide. Did they find a common cause or something that can override all of this? They found one thing, quote, the lack of closeness to one's parents was the most significant predictor for these 5 diseases. Relationships, stress and conflict with parents. Parents, I encourage you to do everything you can to build a loving, close relationship with your children, because that will be your greatest asset in raising them and causing your children to love Christ, to follow Christ and everything It comes back to your relationship with them. And research shows this about men with stress in their life. You want to know how to handle stress in your life? Your parents needed to start out when you were young. It says men who say that they had a good relationship with their father, not so much their mother, their father, while they were growing up, react less day to day stress as an adult. They handle it so much better. And then they said boys who grew up in loving homes tend to be much better at managing stress when they get older. It's interesting. To handle stress as an adult is so dependent upon the relationships that are built with you by your parents when you are younger. You take a 12 to 14-year-old. What is the possibility of young people and that age and all thinking about suicide? You take a teen without a close relationship to their father, 12 to 14 years old, they're 300% more likely to think about suicide. Not so much commit suicide, but to think about it. You take a 15 to 16-year-old teenager without a close relationship to their father, not so much their mother, you know that 15 to 16-year-old is 400% more likely to think of suicide. I'm convinced that one's relationship with their father is a key factor in every child's life to thinking about suicide. Look at Michael Jackson. People see his weird behavior, things that he says, and they say, what causes that? I say this, take one long look at his daddy. His father said to him once when Michael was 5, 6 years old, and I forget what went wrong, and he turned and he said, Daddy. And his father said to that child, I am not your father. I am your manager, and don't you ever forget that. And Michael Jackson many times has said, I've never forgotten that. And Michael made this statement, I just wanted a dad, a father who showed me love. And my father never did that. He never once said, Michael, I love you. You want to understand the behavior of Michael Jackson and many things he said? Take a long look at his daddy. As fathers, we have a tremendous impact upon our children. And if anything a pastor should do in the church is teach fathers, men, how to father their children, how to love their wife and how to love their children. That should be one of the main teachings of any church. So let me tell you, relationships are critical in revival in the church.